Hey, thanks for checking out Nuts and Bolts with Tone. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about something that's pretty important to me, as it's a very important thing to do, and I have found that a lot of younger techs, a lot of people coming up, don't know how to do this test. They don't know how important it is, and that's the block test. So a block test is a chemical that you hold above the cooling system. And as vapors come through the fluid, it's looking for hydrocarbons. So the reason that you're going to do this test is if you have hydrocarbons in your cooling system, you have an overheat problem, whatever, you're losing coolant internally, not externally, doesn't matter. You suspect there's a head gasket issue, there's a crack in the block, crack in the head, whatever, somehow combustion pressure is getting into the cooling system. Combustion gas is getting into the cooling system. Now, you have to understand the theory behind this, and this is pretty important to understand. So your cooling system operates, most vehicles, around 16 pounds. I just had a vehicle the other day. I think the cap went up to 25 pounds. I can't remember. It was a Duramax, I think. So, 25 pounds, but some are like 13 to 15. But anyways, let's just say 13 to 25 pounds of pressure. That's what a cooling system has. So your combustion pressure generally on a gas is 150 pounds. That's what your compression is, right? 150 psi. So you have 150 psi of pressure, and it's put in it, and obviously that is going to overcome the 16 to 25 pounds of cooling system. So it's going to push, the pressure is going to go into your cooling system. And that's how you end up having overheat problems and things like that, because now you've just increased your cooling system pressure. Your cooling system builds pressure based on heat, and the heat of the coolant exchanging from the engine. It goes through the engine, takes the heat, brings it back to the radiator. Then with the radiator flow, the cooling fans, it pulls through, cools down the coolant, and then returns back to the engine. And then it's regulated by the thermostat, which is opens and closes with heat. Pressure. Pressure equals heat. They have it all calculated where the amount of pressure that it needs allows the thermostat to open at 195 pounds or whatever. It doesn't open till 195 because it needs the engine to warm up. So it stays closed, engine warms up. As soon as it gets above the operating pressure, temperature of the thermostat opens, cooling system flows back through the radiator, cools it off, brings it back to the engine. It's a constant cycle. Now let's take that normal regulating pressure temperature, and now let's push a bunch of pressure in there, which we've just increased the heat. So now your cooling system gets hotter, then your cap releases, because your cap is designed to release at 16 pounds. So at 16 pounds, pushes the spring open, pushes the coolant into the bottle, because if you keep that coolant in there and it doesn't go anywhere, it's going to go to the weakest point. It's just going to push out. So then it pushes through your cap. Then when it cools off, tries to suck the coolant back through. It's a constant cycle, but if it just continues to build up pressure, it'll just push out of the bottle. It'll overflow. In this video, that's actually what I suspect happened. I block test. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do a block test. It's kind of weird with the vehicle I'm showing you because it's an older van. It took a really long time to warm up, and because of what's going on with, I couldn't. It has a rod knock. And so I couldn't warm it up like I normally would. But it's a good example because in the end, we have the result to show you what it looks like when you do have a problem. So let's get in this video. I'm going to show you the block tester. I'm going to show you the one that I use. And I'll also show you how to use it. I'll show you what it looks like when it fails. Let's go check it out right now. All right. First thing you got to do, get your tester here. Fill up both sections to the line right there. I'm going to put that on. Just be real gentle. Oops. I pulled apart the wrong section. Not thinking what I'm doing here. Alright, we're going to fill this one up to the line here. Anytime you get an overheat, you should always block test a vehicle. And it's good to block test it before you pressure test it, because that way you don't have coolant spewing everywhere, and then you know if it's blown or not. So if it's blown, then you know if the miles are there, then you know it's going to get an engine or whatever. So I like to pull the cap and do a block test right away from what's trapped in the cooling system first. Do a couple puffs like that. Let it sit there for a minute. All right, so we're gonna look at it, and it passed the preliminary block test. So now we're gonna run it, and what I like to do is use this good old trusty funnel. It's about the only time I use it is for this type of stuff here. Find your adapter. Doesn't look like I have one. Maybe that's the right one there. My set's old, so it doesn't have all the stuff all the fancy stuff that a lot of them have. Okay, all right, got the right one here. All right, so sometimes you gotta make do. So we're gonna put we got the AC switch here in the way. I don't really want to do that. All right, I think that's gonna work. Now what you gotta do is you gotta start it up and do it. Technically, to do it the right way, you want to wait until the engine's warmed up and steam is coming out of the radiator. I use the funnel because that way I can pull vapors, and it doesn't matter if I suck up any coolant. Because if you suck up coolant, then that will change. And it'll give you a false negative. You'll think it's blown, but it's really not. Now, I haven't looked at this car. I don't know if it has coolant leaks. I don't know how low it is. This is straight up from cold running. All right. So this is not going to work. Need to get an extension. All right, so my coworker had an adapter. All right, so what we're going to do, since the coolant is full, we're going to suck some out. Get you one of these fluid evacuators. So generally, if the coolant is normal level, I will suck it down about 6 inches or so. Depending on the radiator, the size of the cooling system, I'll suck it down some, because I really don't want coolant to be coming up out of the funnel. So sometimes you have to suck it out while it's running, just to keep the level down. So let's see if this will work. I think I'm gonna have to use my coworkers. Mine's not gonna work. All right, so if this works, all right, I don't know if this is gonna work right, but we'll see. really like how high that is. Alright, so what I did there was I blew away the water or the coolant, so that way I know if the cap is leaking here. It's nothing worse than chasing your tail and not knowing that you have a leak here. The first thing I noticed right off the bat is the radiator cap is not good. See that? Anytime you do cooling system work, anytime there's an overheat, anytime there's an iffy engine or anything like that, replace this always. It's like a thermostat. When you're doing cooling system work, it's a good idea to replace the thermostat while you're in there and the system is empty. Normally I would put a throttle stick on the throttle and warm up the throttle, but this one I'm a little leery because it's got a rod knock. We're just trying to determine why it has a rod knock. Did it overheat and blow a head gasket? Is that why it's knocking? So while we're letting this thing warm up, let's enjoy a fresh beverage. My very first bang, my coworker gave me this to try this out. This sounds like something my son would like. Rainbow Unicorn. He had a Rainbow Unicorn birthday party one year. Pretty good. Now remember, a key is to watch this water, this coolant level, to make sure that it doesn't push up in the funnel. Because it could be like right here, and as soon as you put that thing in there and you suck it, it'll pull the coolant up, even though it's not touching the top. That's why I don't like this tall funnel thing here, but it's working so far. What you do if coolant is coming up in here, what you do is you pull it to the side. I'm trying to get a good angle. You pull it to the side of the hole and you kind of just go above the steam and try to pull it up without getting any coolant in it. This test is very sensitive to hydrocarbons, which is what gas is. Raw fuel is a hydrocarbon. And the vapors will turn this thing instantly. If you went over some gasoline and you sniff this, it would turn yellow right away. So what this thing will start to do right now, it's a nice pretty blue, right? If it is blown and you'll see it, it'll either turn right away or it'll start to turn. It'll turn green, and then that means that there are some hydrocarbons in there. And that means now you have to determine, is there enough that it's blown, or is it just partially blown? But hydrocarbons is what will turn this. Hydrocarbons and coolant. Sometimes it will change even if there's no vapors coming out. The other thing you can do is you check the bottom of this often to make sure that it's not wet like it got engulfed in coolant. Now when there's a lot of steam, the heat from the steam, it will make this wet from the steam, but it won't look like you dipped it in water. That's what you want to keep an eye on. To speed this process up, you would put a throttle stick on this and let it warm up. Another test that works really well is with a gas analyzer. You hold the emissions probe over the coolant, over the steam, and if there's any hydrocarbons, it'll register on a digital meter, and it will tell you if there's hydrocarbons. And I've had some where it was like smoking real bad and just blown, and the minute I sniffed it, it was 2,000. That was the max hydrocarbons the machine would be. Be really careful if you do that test. Be very, very careful. If you suck up any coolant, you will ruin the bench of the machine. The bench is the computer, basically, and you'll destroy it. You'll have to buy a new one, and it's very expensive. Or if you have to tell the boss that you broke it, it's very expensive. A lot of places don't allow you to do a block test with an emissions analyzer because of the chance of ruining the bench. So far, the only thing I see with this thing is oil leaks. Another thing that you want to look for with cooling systems is staining. So this one here has a ton of staining all over the radiator, and the HEADLAMP canister sits behind and in between the bottle here and the radiator. And the HEADLAMP canister is covered in coolant, meaning that coolant pushed out in this area. I'm assuming it overheated and it pushed out of this cap, and it overfilled this bottle. Not sure, that's my guess. I just started looking at this, and I've never looked at this van. And to let you know, I've never ruined a bench with a gas analyzer, and I've tested block tests with the analyzers a lot. I've had Subarus that would not fail a block test, but failed with an emissions tester. Same thing with the Honda. I had a Honda one time, had a blown head gasket and a leaking heater core, and the only way I could prove the head gasket was with the emissions tester. The other thing that you need for this is you need a good flashlight to be able to see down inside that hole, and we use this Observer Tools flashlight to do that. All right, here we go. We're bubbling up. Lifetime warranty. Alright, so this thing's been running for quite some time now, about 30 minutes. Got a stick on it. Still blue. Gonna do one last test. We are still blue. This is how you do a block test. This means that it passed. Do this every time. Normally it won't take this long because you can warm the engine up. Normally you don't have a rod knock. So we're going to deduce this one as a passed block test. Now I'm going to pressure test it. Okay, so this thing was having a real hard time warming up. And when I turned it off, the cooling system finally moved and it pushed all the coolant way up here. And so then I finally got steam. So I already dumped out my tester. So I went and filled it back up real quick and started testing it because I had steam, and we failed. Okay, this is why you're persistent on vehicles. Now let's say this thing had a leaking water pump or you were going to recommend a thermostat, and this was the result. Well, it has a blown head gasket. So in this one it needs a motor because it's rod knock. However, if it didn't have a rod knock, you wouldn't want to go and do cooling system repairs without pulling the cylinder head. So this is what, now if I continued to test it, it would turn yellow. All right, now we're getting more yellow. All right, I'm gonna stop there. This one is yellow. It blew the head gasket when it overheated. So now I gotta pressure test it and see why it overheated, which is the whole reason I'm looking at it, to see what the cause of all of this is, because obviously it blew the head gasket, and because of that caused the rod knock, possibly. That's my guess. Anyways, let's pressure test it. All right, so in this video you saw the start to finish way to do this. You saw kind of a little bit of trials and tribulations with trying to get the engine warmed up. That's the key. Some engines, if they're just completely just blown really bad, the minute you pop that cap and test it, like I talked about in the video, it'll fail immediately. I've had some that I tested that had a coolant leak that was so bad that I couldn't block test it, and so I just did a real quick like snip of the cooling system and it failed immediately. And that way I didn't go and put a water pump and a thermostat and all this stuff on there just to turn around and say, hey, it needs a head gasket. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was informative. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. I will get back to you on the question, how to do it if you have a specific vehicle, a symptom, whatever, it doesn't matter. You can also find me on Instagram at Nuts and Bolts with Tone. I talk about daily life, mechanic stuff, tool stuff, everything. You can also ask me questions on there through Instagram, and I will get back to you. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that bell. You get notified of all my future content, which you're definitely going to want to see. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.